Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Product for Product. Thanks for tuning in this week. Today, we are continuing our discussion on in-app messaging with the tool Pendo. We are excited to have Trevor Bruner on the show today to discuss his experiences in product and working with Pendo. Welcome to the show, Trevor. Let's take a sec to introduce yourself.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here, and thanks for having me. Again, Trevor Bruner. I am a product value stream lead at Tasktop. We can get into what the heck that title actually means if you'd like. And it's basically a director level role over product and engineering for our Tasktop Viz product. And excited to be here to talk about Pendo and how we use it and all the things that it does for us.
Hi, Trevor. Hi, Matt. Welcome, Trevor, to our show. So tell us a bit first about what your company is doing. What type of product is it?
So Tasktop Viz is a value stream management tool to help companies analyze the flow of their software delivery process. It's a lot of words, but what it means is we sell to the non-digital natives that build a ton of software. So automotive companies, banks, insurance companies, airlines have massive software development shops. And people don't typically think of them as building a lot of software, but they do. What Tasktop Viz does is allows them to pull in information from all of their tools, the Jiras, the ServiceNows, version 1, all the various tools that they have, pull all that data into a single pane of glass and analyze their process flow. So how many features are they getting done on a month on each different product they have? Where are their bottlenecks? How long does it take for work to complete? How much of that time that work is happening is actually active time versus wait time, right? Because sometimes you could find that it takes a month to complete something, but it was really only actually actively worked on for 3 days. And the rest of the time was spent on things being in a wait queue somewhere. And so we help companies visualize and understand their software delivery process so that they can make it better, so that they are able to become more competitive in their marketplace.
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't usually ask too many questions about the products that our guests are building, and I kind of figure that there is a lot of really interesting products out there that we're missing on, mainly because they're not really product management tools, but still, it's really interesting to learn about it. But that really leads me to our discussion today with Pendo and in-app messaging. What type of in-app messaging you guys are using, with Pendo specifically, but let's say in general first, what would be the scenarios that you were looking for or started using in-app messaging in your product?
So the reason we started using Pendo, our previous product, it's still a product we're selling actively in the market, but the one we built prior to Viz was an on-prem tool. And one of the challenges when I was working on that tool was you would build something and you'd have no good way to know if that's actually being used or not. And so it's very difficult to get any sort of telemetry about what customers were using on our tool because it's on-prem and they don't want us to have a phone home feature where we're sending data out of their behind their firewall to us. And so the reason we first went to use Pendo was because we could flag features and we could track what people were doing. So we knew where the activity was happening in the application. And that's the original reason why we wanted something like Pendo, was so that we could see what pieces of the application were being used more often and by who.
So the data analytics part of Pendo. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Nice.
And then once we got into that, then became more comfortable with that. And that became part of our workflow and our process to flag new features so that we'd get analytics on them. Once we got that sort of relatively down pat, then we decided to start adding in, to see what else Pendo had to offer. And then we started using it for things like tooltips. So the last thing we wanted to do was have a developer spend all their time working on a feature and then spend just as much time building in some sort of in-application messaging, some sort of like old tooltip. We wanted it to be much more speedy, if you will, and less of engineering overhead to be able to say, this part of the application maybe needs more explanation. Let's just go add in a little question mark that a customer can click on and up pops some instructions. Yeah. And so we've been doing that a lot more.
Yeah, and tooltips is actually one of the simplest things that someone can think about, that maybe we don't think about them as in-app messaging, but they're using the same type of technology that something happened. Either it is an activity in the system, an event that is raised, or someone click on something, and then this message come up in that place. So tooltips is basically one of the simplest one, and it makes a lot of sense for people to start with that.
I'm curious how it looks in Pendo.
The way it shows up for us is it's simply a little question mark inside of a circle. So you would see maybe a chart or a graph of sorts, and then you would have just a little question mark off to the side, and someone could click on that, and it could give you more insight into what the chart is, what it means. Not necessarily your specific implementation of it, but it's like, here's what this information is trying to convey.
Gotcha.
And then, another thing we do is guided walkthroughs. So when you first set up the application and you first log in, you're presented with somewhat of a blank screen. And there's some steps you need to take to start getting any sort of real benefit. And so we have these guided walkthroughs where you start this, and I think you've probably seen this before, where it says, click here. This is where you do X, Y, Z.
Yep.
Great, next. And then it has you click here, and this is what this part of the application is doing. And that's also very, very useful because it doesn't require a human to sit there and walk you through it. The application is guiding you through, what you need to know.
Yeah, that's an extremely useful application of in-app messaging. I really like that.
Yeah, just a curiosity, because I think everyone that has been involved in putting those together, the guidance to learn how to use the system, or the onboarding, as some people are calling them, have gone through many iterations of creating really, really bad ones until we were able to create good ones. Did you share the same experience?
I don't think we had quite that same challenge of creating bad walkthroughs before creating a decent one. I'm not saying ours is perfect, but the nice thing is that the effective cost of creating those walkthroughs was relatively inexpensive. And what I mean by that is we were able to give that task, if you will, to someone who was relatively junior. And engineers are expensive, and you're very constrained in how many of them you have and what they're actually working on. So having them sort of work on this off the side of their desk can be a very expensive proposition. But the nice thing is that we could iterate on this in a fairly inexpensive fashion before sending it out live. And even if we didn't like what it was like live, fixing it was a pretty simple process.
Yeah. So tell us a bit how it's done in Pendo, because that's also one of the powers in a system like that you don't need a developer to do that. And you have all the tools for someone that is not, someone maybe more junior that can actually go through it and do it. Maybe try to explain a bit, the features of how it's done on Pendo.
Yeah, so I was not the person doing the walkthrough, so I can't speak in excruciating detail about it. But from my understanding of how it works, you have a Pendo wizard. And so you would go to navigate to your application, and then in your browser, you would start up this Pendo wizard, and it's able to detect, what UI element you're hovering on. And then you can, by using that, then it knows to flag that element with this information, and you can sort of, create the walkthrough in that fashion, by providing the text and the steps of what you want the walkthrough to look like.
Yeah, and that's I think people that have listened to previous episodes know that I'm also a Pendo user, so I'm familiar with a bit with that. But that's a pretty accurate explanation of that, and it's quite rich in functionality, where you can set up different segments that can see that, a different type of users. You can do lots of many different things. People move from one step to the other. Different type of templates that they have, or you can build your own. Perfect. Do you have other use cases that you're utilizing the in-app messaging for?
So one other thing we do is we've got a couple of things, which I'm not sure if you quite qualify these as messaging, but we have user poll. So we ask people to give us what their role is, and we provide a couple of preset options. And the reason we have that is because it's not just interesting to know what is being used in the application, but what persona is using that in the application, right? So are the VPs using this feature more often or less often? Are the individual engineering managers using some feature more often than others, and knowing not just what's happening on a broad scale, but on a persona level is something we track. And then we also use it for ENPS. So I'm sorry, not ENPS, but just NPS. So customer feedback. We pop up that NPS survey on a somewhat randomized basis and get feedback from our customers that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also there, I found throughout the years that Pendo really did a lot of work to enhance the NPS and associate it with the different features, and it goes much deeper than a regular NPS does. So it's something that it's really interesting. Are you using those features as well?
I'm not sure if we're using the ones you're specifically referring to. I do know that we're still doing the traditional NPS. The other thing we're using of Pendo as well is in-app videos. So it's not, we've got this analytics dashboard in Tasktop, which gives people insights, but we also have a strong coaching culture to help our customers know how to build their software better. And as you can imagine, getting on calls is a time-consuming process, and it's fairly resource intensive. And so what we have done is taken some of those sessions and filmed videos that are accessible directly through the Viz UI. And so those are quite useful as well.
Do they pop up at certain times if people go to certain screens or pages within the site?
It doesn't pop up unexpectedly. You've got to decide to click on it. Engage with it, right? Yeah.
Gotcha.
Personally, I find those things to be pretty irritating when it just forces you to close it out because you've got something else to do.
Exactly, like a pop-up screen. Yeah, pop-up blocker.
Yeah, exactly. But if you decide this is interesting, I've got a few minutes and I really want to dig into this and understand it, I've got the the bandwidth, then I think that sort of in-app communication and education is super valuable.
That's cool. That kind of leads me to another question I was having about throttling in-app messaging or push notifications. Does Pendo kind of give the ability to throttle those so you're not quote unquote spamming customers, I guess?
Interesting question. So the way we have Pendo set up, it's almost more of a pull messaging. So we don't typically push messages onto customers and onto our users. Occasionally, like this has been a scenario where there's been some ongoing slowness in the application, right? And so we have used Pendo when a customer first logs on to say, hey, just letting you know, things are working. They're just maybe appearing a bit slow right now. That's something we popped up at that time. But the other sort of messaging, I guess the other messaging is if we release a new, a cool new feature, when a customer first logs in, that will pop up as a notice of, hey, we've released X, Y, and Z.
Right. If
you'd like to learn more, click here. If you want to exit out, feel free to.
Right. I guess it's specific to the kind of whether you're trying to grow the product you're delivering, I guess, at the end of the day, whether you're trying to grow users or trying to help users or whatnot. So it's case by case. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And Pendo does have a throttling. So you can set up throttling in general on your in-app messaging and stuff like that. And you can even say, what will be the priority between them and how many they can see in every specific day or whatever. But I think also the on-demand messaging that you're referring to, you're probably using also the resource center, right?
Correct. Right. That's the there's a little question mark on the lower right-hand side of the screen. And in that, we have a lot of documentation. So there's videos in there, and there's FAQs and other just good to know things that people can go to. And they can also, from there, start up one of the walkthroughs again if they want to see it again for the first time. They can do that. And so the resource center is quite valuable as well.
Yeah, so I think most people are familiar with the little circle on the bottom from either a bot or from Intercom, but that's actually a pretty similar functionality. But instead of having a bot or an intercom type of feature that you chat with someone, this one gives you all the different resources that you might want to present to the users. And it's also based on segmentation, so you can really customize it to different people in different ways. And you can customize also that icon, so you can have your own icon where you position it, and then what people are going to see inside. So I've seen some interesting implementation of that, with on-demand starting your onboarding guides or different documentation, links to help desk and different things like that.
It's quite valuable for us. We really like it.
That leads me into thinking about experimentation. Are you doing any sort of experimentation with these in-app messaging features?
Not so much. Primary thing we're doing is developing of the actual, features of the application itself, and less around the messaging. And so the other piece of our the thing you should be aware of is our product. The number of people at any given organization who log into it, it's in the dozens of people at the site. We're looking to grow that, obviously, but it's not as if we have
the scale.
It's for fairly senior folks at the company at our customer sites, and so it's not like we've got 10,000 people,
hordes of people,
hundreds of thousands of people logging in per day. Where you're like, if I send this segment this message and that segment that message, how does that change their behavior? We don't have that need yet, and it wouldn't, the numbers wouldn't be statistically significant anyways.
Right. Yeah, and that's also one of the issues with the NPS as well. That usually it's much more powerful when they do have a volume of people. For sure.
Fair point.
Tell us a bit about who is managing this in your organization, because I've seen organizations where I've done it myself and I'm still doing it as a product manager. I'm the one managing it. But in many other organizations, I've seen that they have dedicated people that actually are managing these in-app messaging. What's your experience with that?
So there were two people who were predominantly responsible for the in-app messaging. One was a product manager, and then the other was our sort of documentation specialist. And they're both able to go in and create the messages and handle it that way. It was not something that was a full-time job, right? Handling Pendo it takes a bit of brain power to get it up and running and understand all the nuances of it, and then it does take some time to flag the features if you're doing the feature tracking and analytics that way. But once you've kind of got it up and going, it's some percentage, but not a huge percentage of somebody's time to keep it, the care and feeding of it going on. So yeah, we had, like I said, a product manager and a documentation specialist who were both able to handle the request for Pendo.
And did you have to set up some naming conventions or some ways that they will make sense to work so people don't kind of step on each other's toes or things like that?
I don't think so. Give me an example. I don't think there was a concern around naming conventions.
That's great. I mean, I had these problems in the past, so that's why I'm always asking about this. It also really depends, I think, on the organization and how you do things and how the communication is between people and stuff like that. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I don't believe that there were any sort of problems. I think there was probably some conversations with the engineers on how to properly the naming conventions of flagging of features, right? So if we want to track something, they've got to go in and add a tag, and so I'm sure there's some convention that they have, but I don't think there was any sort of conflicts with other things in the application.
I see. That's cool. What about experience with other products? Do you ever looked at other products, or just because you had Pendo you decided to use that?
We started using Pendo before I got on the team, so I was not involved in any sort of bake-off.
Okay.
I have had conversations though with Amplitude, which seems like a great product, and I've got nothing negative to say about Amplitude. I think they're probably a little bit better on tracking workflows and funnels, if that makes sense. So you want somebody to go from point A to point B. Can you see how they got there? Can you see where they fell off that train? And so I think for that, Amplitude might be a bit better. But for what we need and for where we are, I think Pendo is doing the job just fine. And
I don't believe that Amplitude has in-app messaging functionality. It's really...
I think you're right about that too. So I think that, and as you can tell, the majority of what we're doing with Pendo is simple feature flagging and
analytics
and analytics. Yeah, feature analytics and the messaging piece.
Well, that's cool. And Moshe and I talked about this before, like where Pendo is a tool that does have, it works with onboarding, it has analytics, has in-app messaging. And there are some tools out there that are more specialized, that like Amplitude Mixpanel that specifically focus on analytics and stuff. So they couple with Pendo and stuff. And I'm curious what the integrations, have you work with any sort of integrations with other products?
Basically all we do is work with integration.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But I don't, because the integration tool is all about tapping into other tools, APIs, and Viz is all about pulling data in from those other tools into Viz. But then we also, we have, what else do we have? When we get an NPS score from Pendo, that gets sent to our Slack channel. So we get to see, every time somebody replies, we get to see what their score was and any comment.
And I believe they have a direct integration as well, right? For that.
I think so. I think that's true.
But I mean, that's a good point about being either a specialized product or platform that does different things. You have like Amplitude or Mixpanel that don't do in-app messaging, and then we talked in the past about app queues and user pilot that do messaging, but they don't do the
analytics so
product
much.
Analytics.
Yep.
And then you have a product like Pendo that does both of them. So I think part of it is a matter of preference. We discussed this in previous episodes a few times, I think. And part of it is also, sometimes it's just what the tools that you already have in-house and you try to utilize them the best that you can.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge is how much do you want to spend and what do you want to get for it, right? So if you're talking about, Pendo does a lot of what we need and, it's the price is about right. I don't think we want to spend double to get something, two different things that do basically what Pendo does.
And then you will have to integrate them.
And then you've got to make them work together, right? So there's a lot of, there's cost on both financial and just the human side of the equation.
Exactly. This is where we ask our guests, what are the 3 best features they like of the product and the 3 worst features that they don't like in the product, so that if Pendo is listening, they might take it into account that they need to fix that.
Best features, I think just it's pretty straightforward to use. I mean, it's a pretty easy product to deal with. They recently added I forgot the term of it, but it's an engagement metric. They basically for a specific customer will pre-calculate an engagement score based upon are they using it more? Are they using it more often? How many features are they using that you feel are important? And so something like that I think is very nice because they kind of take some of the guesswork out of those calculations and they make it pretty. They give you the answer. Now, if you want to change that, if you want to create your own sort of North Star metric, that's fine. But this is a pretty good one right out of the gate. Yeah. So again, it's not that there's any one thing that I like about Pendo. It's just it's got a lot of good things about it that seems to be pretty straightforward to do. So
that's also an important thing in a product, that when it's easy to use and it doesn't. You don't have to break your head on how do you use something or get stuck every time. That's a great thing. Perfect. What about least favorite features or things that are missing in the system that you think that they should really, really fix?
Some of the charts on their dashboards, I would like for them to be a bit more customizable. But again, I think that goes back to they're opinionated, which means that they don't have to solve the entire world's worth of problems. They've got to solve the problems that they feel are important. And even if I would like those to be, again, more nuanced, if that makes sense. So, there's certain things I wish we would be able to slice and dice the data a bit differently. But that said, it could be that if I were allowed to do that, I'd get into analysis paralysis. So again, I can't complain too much about that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've seen this theme also before about how specific vendors do it in a certain way because they believe that's the way to do it. Not that it's a bad thing. Sometimes it's best practices or whatever it is. Or as you mentioned, Trevor, that they aim towards a specific solution, right? or a
Mhm.
specific persona or market fit or whatever it is.
If they can give you something out of the can, like a can report or a can visual, the barrier of entry is easier to where some products you have to, like, the learning curve would be steep.
To set it up, everything is dynamic, and then
you have to have dev do everything, right? So
exactly, yeah. And so I can completely appreciate why those limitations exist, especially from someone who's building, an analytics tool myself. The more dials and levers you give a customer, the more edge cases you have to think about, and the more places that you're opening yourselves up to even more, right? Because once you start giving customizability, people start seeing the potential world that's out there still.
Yep.
And if you restrict that, again, that's in some ways kind of what Apple does, right? They say, this is what you're going to get. If you don't like it, you're wrong. This is the best thing there is.
Yeah. But you know what? This is also why I love talking with product managers. We always have empathy to the products that we're using and to the people that build those products.
Mm-hmm.
We understand both of the ends, like we're the users, but we're also product managers. So I really love the way that you said it. I really felt your empathy to them. So that's great.
I had that experience today. I was using an application, healthcare application, and I had the in-app messaging. It was a chat, but I was thinking behind the scenes, there's some product manager thinking of how I'm using the solution. So that's nice.
Yeah.
But that's also why I always love to give them my feedback, because I know that they're looking for feedback, because I look for feedback from my products. Yep. So I'm trying to be a good product manager citizen, and as much as I can.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like you sometimes get more empathy, and at the other times I find that I'm more easily exasperated, because I feel like sometimes I do have a little bit of insight, and it's like, wait a minute, you should not have let this go out the door this way. But other times you realize that everybody's human, and every company and every product has got their limitations and trade-offs you got to make. So
yeah. But hey, you don't have to be shy. If there is a feature you really don't like, and you think that they got it wrong and they should fix it,
agreed.
By all means, tell us.
Yeah. I don't really have just one big outstanding thing that I wish I could change.
No, so that's good.
It's a pretty good tool. I would recommend it.
How was your relationship with them? Have you had to reach out to them and have conversations with them in the past, or is it pretty hands off?
No, they've got pretty good customer support. Like they're pretty responsive. Yeah, they've helped us out, and I got no qualms with the customer support folks. So that's again another benefit. It's not something that's product related, but it's something that really is whole product related. That whole experience is part of what you pay for, and I feel like they do a good job of that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. We definitely always looking at not just the product, but also the experience with the company. Do they really care about you, want you to be successful, and even obsess about you, right? So it's good to hear that you feel good with their customer support.
Yeah, no, I definitely do.
Perfect. Anything else you would like to share with us about your experience with Pendo and in-app messaging?
It's been a wonderful eye-opening experience, going from, like I said, working previously in my company on an on-prem tool where you weren't able to notify customers of anything. You weren't able, in the application, you weren't able to get their feedback. You weren't able to, let them know about, give them any information whatsoever. To going to now, it's a very, very liberating, and I really enjoy it.
That's what I think is so cool about in-app messaging. The more I learn about it, the more I hear people speak about it. Whether you're serving to 1 million people or whether you're serving to 20 people, it offers so much benefit to the user of your product and to you yourself as a product manager to understand how they're working with it. It's really engaging, and I think that's so cool.
Yeah, we definitely want to be able to get in touch with our users any way we can. And that was the main reason I was looking for a product like that when I started looking for this. But then when you see all the options you can do with that and all the opportunities you have with that, and also the tools that are available like Pendo these days that you don't have to develop it in-house, then it's definitely, it's almost like one of those products you have to have.
Right. Yeah. If you've got a SaaS application, cloud application, and you don't have some sort of in-app messaging, it feels very awkward. You're definitely
Absolutely.
missing out.
Absolutely. And these days with the product-led growth and product-led in general, you really need to have that. That's part of what your product has to do.
Yeah. And I would even argue it's something that your customers they're not going to consciously notice, but there's going to be a feel. They're going to go to your site and it's going to feel like something's not quite right. Something's off. And I don't even think a lot of users will understand what was missing, but
yeah, you're right. Yeah. It becomes a standard these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, once it becomes a standard, then everyone will want to use that. And I think that's what the companies that are building these products have really realized early on, that we shouldn't really build it ourselves. We should use a product that does it well, and build the core of our product ourselves.
Exactly.
So, Trevor, where can people find you?
So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, just Trevor Bruner. I'm in Austin here on LinkedIn. And you can also find, earlier this year, published a book, A Quick Start Guide to Product Management, on Amazon. And you can find other bits of nuggets that I wish I knew about when I started off in the world of product management. So
that's perfect.
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. We will put the links both to your LinkedIn and to the Amazon book. Do you have a website also where you sell the book, or it's only on Amazon?
Only on Amazon right now.
Yeah, so we will include the links on the episode description and on LinkedIn.
Great.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Trevor. This has been really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
So for all listeners, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.